I used to believe that happiness had a finish line, that if I worked hard enough, earned a bit more, upgraded to the bigger house, drove the sleeker car, everything would finally fall into place. But at 39, sitting in a 4-bedroom house with a decent salary and 2 healthy kids, I felt more lost than ever, like I was running a race with no end in sight. Every morning started the same. I'd wake up, check my phone, scroll through social media, and see old classmates traveling, launching businesses, buying yachts. Their smiles through filters screamed success. Mine, however, were tight-lipped, rehearsed for family photos. My life felt like a checklist: job, marriage, mortgage. But the joy, the feeling of fulfillment, was absent. Evenings were the worst. I'd sit at the dinner table with my wife and kids, physically present but mentally drifting. The noise of their laughter used to bring me joy. Lately, it just reminded me of how distracted I'd become. I'd pretend to listen while calculating bills, planning future investments, trying to figure out how to stretch our income, just enough to climb another invisible rung. One afternoon, I received an internal company memo. It was a corporate social responsibility push. Every employee had to complete 10 hours of community service that quarter. I sighed, annoyed. Volunteering felt like another box to tick. My supervisor recommended a local community garden. It was nearby and apparently quiet, so I signed up thinking I'd just get it over with. That first Saturday, I walked into the garden wearing sneakers too clean for the dirt. Kids ran between tomato vines. Old folks sipped lemonade, and the air carried a calm I hadn't felt in years. I met Mr. Davis that day, a retired janitor who now volunteered daily. He wore faded overalls. His hands were calloused, and yet he moved like a man without a single worry. He greeted me with a smile so sincere it caught me off guard. We worked side by side that morning, barely speaking, pulling weeds and planting herbs. I remember thinking, this man has nothing, no status, no luxury. Yet there was something in his eyes I hadn't seen in my reflection for years. Peace. When I got home, my son asked if I have fun. I almost said no out of habit, but something in me hesitated. Maybe it was the scent of fresh basil still clinging to my hands, or the memory of sunlight on my face as I watered the soil. I simply nodded and said, yeah, it wasn't so bad. The second time I returned to the garden, I brought gloves. Not because I planned to stay long, but because something about Mr. Davis's quiet presence stayed with me. There was no performance in the way he moved, no effort to impress. He just tended to the soil like it was sacred, like each seed held more promise than any paycheck. He offered me a sandwich during our break. We sat under the shade of a lemon tree. He didn't talk much about himself. Instead, he asked questions I wasn't used to, real ones. How was I sleeping? What made me laugh recently? I didn't have answers. I stared at the ground, embarrassed that I couldn't remember the last time I'd laughed without sarcasm. He smiled, not judging, and said, sometimes we fill our lives so full, there's no room left to feel anything. Then he handed me a small bag of vegetables to take home. I didn't want to accept it, but he insisted. Sharing is how we remind ourselves we already have enough. That sentence stuck with me. Over the next few weeks, I started showing up earlier. I even brought my daughter one Saturday. She loved feeding the chickens and got dirt under her nails without caring. Watching her giggle with Mr. Davis made me realize something painful. I hadn't let her just be with me in ages. I was always rushing, checking emails, answering calls. There, In that little patch of earth, time moved differently, slower, kinder. I began cooking more with what we brought home. My wife noticed the shift. So did my son. Our dinners changed. They were simpler, sure. Fresh tomatoes, herbs, warm bread. But we lingered longer at the table. We talked more, laughed more. Not because anything extravagant had happened, but because I finally showed up, fully present. One evening, Mr. Davis told me about his past. He'd lost his wife young, raised 2 kids on a janitor's salary. He never traveled far, never owned much, but he found meaning in every small act, fixing a neighbor's fence, tutoring kids after school, planting seeds he'd never see grow. That night, I cried in the car. I had spent years believing happiness lived in some future achievement, some higher number in my bank account. But here was a man who had less and felt more, who shared not because he had abundance, but because his heart was full. And slowly, mine began to fill too, not with things, but with moments, with silence, with service, with gratitude. In the end, I didn't become richer in the way I once wanted. I became richer in the way I truly needed. Happiness, I learned, is not hidden in some distant dream. It's planted in the garden of now, watered by gratitude, and harvested in the joy of giving. If this story made you pause, even for a moment, to think about what truly matters, then maybe, like me, you're ready to stop chasing and start living. If it touched you, feel free to like, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more stories that help us grow together.